rationality in what they're doing, and they have impacts in the long term, even economically. Tokyo, they thought a lot of companies would move, but end up, because of the earthquake, electricity went up 50% the price. And there are a lot of companies now see Tokyo very good to be, because they have allowed electricity bills, because the buildings are much more efficient. A lot of actually attracting a lot of, the only city in Japan that's growing now is Tokyo, because the population is declining. People are coming to Tokyo because where things works better, is more, in terms of electricity, is very expensive. I mean, the same thing here, we're talking of in California Clean Air Act in 1970s, 69, 70s. People in California and Massachusetts, they're very strict legislation. You know, the business go up, but end up being the opposite. You know, we have the largest per capita income after Washington. Massachusetts is very strict. Massachusetts can do anything because the environment is very strict. But end up attract different kinds of business based on more knowledge than actually the materials. Anyway, that's this is just another project I'm working. If you want more details, that things are now trying to connect to things more with food, water, energy that are related to this global change, because a lot of this thing drives emissions. For example, just to give you a finalize, like 55% of the electricity in some cases, the bill for water treatment is because of electricity bill. And what they're expecting in 2050 is increase 80%, and the consumption of energy 60%, in food, and here's water 55%. What would be the impact of these, particularly in cities? What impacts of these consumption in cities elsewhere? And this is the work I'm kind of starting now, this project in the next 3 years, looking at 8 cities around the world, how to measure these, and how you see the innovation coming in these 3 parts of cities. Anyway, that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Jose. That's very interesting. We have about 10-15 minutes for questions and answers. I'm reserving my question later. Yeah. Yeah, Martin, yeah.
Okay. This was a very interesting talk, and I very much enjoyed it. And I was particularly intrigued by the first part of your talk, when you describe these more global patterns of development with regard to climate change and cities. So I would like to ask you a question that relates to my research, and to kind of compare notes with what you think about that. Basically, ask you for your opinion about this. So I'm in the philosophy department, and I'm an editor with 2 colleagues in Canada of the Journal of Global Ethics. And I convinced my colleagues to do an issue on development. And so with a friend from Wuhan Dashue, we now just sent out a call for papers on a special issue on China's model of development. And I noticed that in your talk, you kept, particularly in your first half, coming back to this shift of power and this shift of growth, and that shift of also carbon and ecological footprint from the Western Hemisphere to the Asian Hemisphere. And my question has also to do with the change in the world that I'm seeing. That when I was a kid, the US model was in a sense the paradigm for global development. But when I now look at China, you see that with the administration of Hu Jintao, he issued, I think as part of the 3 represents policy, to ground policy on science, that science ought to be the foundation of policy. And then Jiang Zemin declared that the creation of an ecological civilization needs to be the priority. And Xi Jinping reiterated that as the top priority of socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era. So it appears to me, I don't know, so we're just asking this question. In your opinion, do you think that the Chinese model of development is or constitutes a future-oriented paradigm for development in general. As a philosopher, I'm just interested in these big patterns and structures, so I have to ask the expert.
It was a very different model. As you know, the political system in China is very difficult to be replicated elsewhere, except if you have a more one-party system. But if you look at the achievements, give you just gave 700 million people out of poverty in 30 years, and how these were actually by rapid economic growth. Just to have an idea, China last year surpassed Brazil in GDP per capita. In 1980, was only 5%, 1/20 of per capita income. In 1980s to now, they now passed Brazil in terms of per capita income. But it was pretty much based, and they are now conscious of this, of heavy investment infrastructure, like cement. Half of the cement in the world is consumed by China. They are not half of the
That's
population.
why the carbon footprint is so
And now they are trying to, rethink the model. But there are a lot of countries looking at China because development policy, as you know, the influential policy and the policy that works, where you have now developed, where things are getting better, is Asia. And people look at China, Vietnam. Vietnam even less reduction in poverty, much more than China. And people start looking this, but they're very difficult in other part how you replicate. Because at the same time, a lot of the global institutions, they are dominated by Western. You work for the UN. The UN basically is run by the Western countries. Because they have control, they give the money, they have the people, and basically, and these institutions, the World Bank, is a World Bank, always the American, and the IMF is European, because they dictate, they can transfer the models through these global institutions. How we look at the transfer of models, a lot of these international organizations. But China, what happened is they are building their own global institutions. Now they have the BRICS, New Development Bank, in the meeting. They have the Asia Infrastructure Bank that they canalize, and they are kind of sell the model through these international institutions. But they are very conscious that there are a lot of problems, and now they are putting in the indicators, are all indicators looking at the quality of environment. See the cities now, when I work in Shanghai, there's a river that comes through, it's very polluted, even 20 years ago, like horrible river that come, Suzhou River, that comes from city and towns, lake, the river comes, was very polluted, but they clean up the river, and now they have like a park. It's very clean. Some even saw some people fishing there. I'm not sure the fish I would eat, but I saw people fishing there. And like this in 2 decades. The thing in China, they have shown, because centralized systems, they can make change very quick. Then in Western model, it's much more difficult to make this change. But in China, the change happens. And we see the emissions now. China was the peak emission. The agreement in Paris is set 2030. In 2015, they said it could reach the peak emissions in 2030. But now it's kind of already reduced, because they are doing a lot of the largest user of renewable energy, both eolic, wind, and then solar power plants, and also a lot of things they are doing in the cities. I was talking, São Paulo have our metro, 1969, and there are 40 stations. Shanghai, they start the metro in 1995, they have 400, and now the largest metro network in the world. And they always used to go to Hong Kong first world, cross Shenzhen or Guangzhou is third world, but all the opposite. I go to Hong Kong, I went to Guangzhou last year, and went to Hong Kong is third world, because kind of the metro is old, inefficient, Boston, studying Boston, now living there. When there, the metro is the same as when in 1995, when I was there, the trains are already old, the same trains. I mean,
Vintage.
They didn't have,
Vintage.
Yeah, but I mean, there are good things in the Chinese model, but a lot of them are not replicable, and they create also a lot of problems. That now they realize, and they're trying to see how can it have different kinds of development.
I think this itself
Thank you
is
very much.
topic for another talk.
Yeah, maybe we can discuss
I can
this
get
over.
Jose come and visit
Yeah, a
us.
lot of people linking it, Confucianism.
let's move to-
Right.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm KK Low. I'm a retired engineer from Intel. I'm just interested in this topic. So the question I was going to ask you about China, but I think your answer is somewhat. But the question was going to be whether China, and they're doing something. They have a top-down system, but they are huge pollution. They produce a lot of pollution, lots of CO2, etc. Do you think they are on the right track? Can they achieve at the end to curb all this pollution and carbon dioxide? So that was going to be a question. It seems like the answer is probably yes, since they're doing something about it, and the government is all powerful. So the second question I was going to have is, how about developed country like us? Our lifestyle is already established, right? And yet our lifestyle, like Tampa, compared to Manhattan, we emit a lot more pollution and carbon dioxide than Manhattan, for example. How are we going to change our lifestyle? Because and the way we consume, like as you say, causing pollution somewhere else, or carbon dioxide somewhere else. What do we need to do here, and what can we do to help?
Come to Patel College.
Yeah, Patel College.
No, I'm not joking.
I
We have
think
some
I
ideas.
think as I said, you don't need rocket science, no need call NASA to see how these flying cars.
Well, the solutions are there. Probably, but
The thing is how to get this solution to the ground and make it work, implemented. And one thing is kind of I've seen a lot of these initiatives, how these dots are connected. And if you look around, a lot of companies are interested in these SDGs, and the city also. Here, not that much, but the cities around they're interested in sustainability. And there are citizens also, citizen groups interested in make things happen. The thing is how to get these things in the agenda. What we're discussing during the lunch, the idea that SDGs, a lot of people complain that it's very difficult to get the goals, but it's called meta-governance. You know the directions these have to go, and then you start having these in the decisions that come, because a lot of cities' decisions take time to change. The city, you build something, this building will be here for 100 years maybe, and can build, turn down the building, build another building.
There's a lot of
But then the new things that come, you could incorporate these ideas. Just talking to someone that working in the Greek village here, Topping Brook. Yeah, and she said now they have a citizen group for sustainability, and the city council members, they listen, the commissioners, and they listen to what the citizens, and they start out bringing these things to the agenda. And the thing is, they start probably, you go back 5 years, they'll be doing things very different. And I think these voices, particularly the system that you have here is not China. China is a different system, but they bring these voices in the system to change the things that come in the future and try to remediate the things in the past. I mean, for example, a lot of things you need to involve retrofit of buildings. But what happened is a lot of cities, London is one example, they had this big drop in the economy, and the government, what they did to create jobs was give incentives to retrofit buildings. And what they did, they actually increased the electricity bill. And you got this money to people, okay, you now have cheaper retrofit, people you can reduce your, and a lot of, it was very unpopular in the beginning, like they put a ban in like Singapore, to go cars to go to the, what's called the,
You mean for the electronic pricing?
yeah, if you go downtown, we have to pay, in London, £8. If you go downtown by car, just enter the central area is £8, like $12. And it's very unpopular, but now people like. I think a lot of these things need like some political momentum to do it in the right place. The mayor at that time was very popular, did this when it kind of was popular. And then it's working. I think there are a lot of these things, I said, you still don't have, these political institution conditions that make these emerge. I think it's more voice, create, diverging voice to incorporate these things in the daily decisions that people know it. There are also these opportunity occasions that you can incorporate things that when you have opportunity to do that and how to do that. And I see that a lot of these happens like this connecting the dots. You know?
Okay.
I was wondering about suburbs, suburban areas. They're not strictly speaking urban, and in the 70s, land use classes basically said that style of things being distributed was better. But now you see, the transportation costs are going to kill them. The single-family housing unit is too expensive and energy hog. Malls are going away. So I just wondering, where does that fit in this large-scale scheme?
More
Well-
like Barcelona.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Atlanta, the way the map was drawn in Atlanta, large parts of what I would have thought would be called suburban were called urban. So is it just a housing density issue for the distinction?
Yeah, the metropolitan area, they call it metropolitan area. In general, people call metropolitan area is where people have like work in downtown, like 2%, at least 5%, depending on the country, that people in that municipalities, they work in Atlanta, and it's called metropolitan because they are connected. No, I would call urban. The suburbs I would call urban, even though they are not, but they have urban infrastructure. Most of them, they have pipes, they have electricity, they have a sewage system. And the way I think is very, what you see as we're talking to Joseph, Washington DC now is the highest per capita income in the West by far. Because what happened, a lot of people live in the suburb, they're moving back to town, to downtown Washington. And the poor people are being expelled, moving to the suburbs. And they can't afford now because they don't have transportation.
Asset inflation.
Yeah.
Prices gone up for property.
Yeah, in the beginning, a lot of people thought about this compact cities, make it, but now it's very difficult because the suburbs are already there. What you see is there are a lot of opportunities, for example, in land use for doing mixed use or improving the other kinds of transportation that you may be subsidized by the, like, in London when they did this, for example, they use metropolitan tax to go downtown, they use the money for the transportation system. And they start, but this is not very popular if you're doing car in the West. But the way will be charge more for cars and uses in public transportation and more redistribution in the, but it's not very easy because the cities are already there. But you will see it can improve a lot of energy, a lot of houses that I've been like living in Japan. Here, I live in Boston, it's 24-hour heating. I go and then the heating and go work. 12 hours a day I'm not at home. I was not at home in Boston and the heating was there. In Japan, you turn off. You just turn even the water, they turn off the water, also the pipes, they don't get frozen. And in Japan, you see is 1/3 of the energy per capita they have in the West. There are a lot of opportunities to do retrofitting, but things are what's key, the conditions that make this thing happen. People should be interested because it's very unpopular. This thing is, you need to have, the Germans they did, the Germans they are doing a lot of closing down the nuclear power plant, doing a lot of the what's called energy belts.
Energiewende.
Energiewende. They have like a lot of, this thing actually came a little bit in the DNA of the new people, the new generation. They are doing things, even though they know they pay more, 30% more for energy than other countries, but they are willing to do it. And they got, like the Green Party is a very important party that brought a lot of these policies and how things, I think, but people start realizing, in long term that sustainability will pay off. I think it's kind of starting seeing this already.
May I ask one question then after?
Yeah.
You initially presented the picture of how the economic power has shifted to the Asia Pacific region with the benefit of poverty reduction and things like that. That consumption is going up, GSTs have gone up. And then you have that graph there where it shows the quality of life indicators and the carbon footprint. And nobody's there in that small time, right? So given this situation now, that more urbanization takes place, how fast can how long can we wait until catastrophe strikes? Because we want the country to move in that direction to have a good life as well as to prevent catastrophe. So
Yeah,
what is that time frame?
No, the
Research?
time frame, the time
I
frame
guess
is,
it's-
I think is, you're talking about the next generation of urbanization to be India and Africa. Because now most of the continent, Europe is very urbanized, Latin America, Europe, even China now is very urbanized. But still parts of Asia, like South Asia, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and also Africa will be urbanized in the next 20, 30 years, is the time you have to bring this innovation and try to make them different. The idea of the SDG and the Green Fund, someone was living in Korea, the Green Fund there, was they're going to fund the rich countries because
Yeah.
historically they pollute more, they will help this transition. Particularly said it's not rocket science, the technology is already there. A lot of it needs some economic incentives and some institutions to transfer these models to those countries and pay for it. But not many people is willing to pay. The idea of the climate change green fund that was created in Paris was 100 billion per year. But right now, like 4 years, like less than 10 million, I think. They have a lot, but very little money. They can't do much for. But at the same time, a lot of these innovations, they have to be done by the countries themselves. For example, you talk about China. 10 billion is nothing. $10 billion in China, you cannot do much in terms of change. And then you need to use this money strategically to bring this innovation. And with Chinese money, the local municipalities and things.
So we need a more of a circular economy, shared economy.
Yes, exactly. Knowledge, I think knowledge, circulation of knowledge and these dots much faster than you had in the past. You had the technology, you now have internet, have all this forum. Also, when I started working, 1980s, 90s, environmental issues are like radical. There's not many NGOs, not like college like this. But now it's kind of have the money, you have the brains, you have the organizations to actually, the arms to spread the knowledge, the things,
Okay.
how it makes work. And you don't have much time, because after they urbanize, it's very difficult to change. If you have the suburbs, how are we going to change? It's too late to do inexpensively, in different way.
Any students want to ask a question? Okay, good.
I saw that your line of studies is focused on the three SDGs goals.
Yeah, just
The energy, the sustainable cities, and the climate change. Are you working in partnership with the country's government? And if so, are you guys reporting this, or are you just using the SDGs as a guideline?
Yeah, you work with, the thing is, when you work with the government, it's very difficult because it's not guaranteed that they are actually getting the science and do it, use the research you did. And anybody, what happened is interesting that the some work we did with the cities, for example, this waste spot. Not because of us, but a lot of partners. You became like Indonesia a national policy, and now they have these community-based composting things. Is in many cities in Indonesia, particularly Java. That was like most of the population is, and because of the start doing this information that's not expensive, you can save money for the city, and so on. But working with cities sometimes is very difficult. This food, water, energy Nexus is a research project they have to implement in the city. And in the 8 cities, they are going to actually share information. They're going to share a lot of information among these. One is São José dos Campos, close to São Paulo, in Brazil. And then you go to share a lot of this. But the things to happen in the city, you don't have the power. The city, they have to.
Yeah, because how they're gonna measure? Because they need to know if they're gonna reach by 2030 this in these countries. How they're gonna measure if people don't send what they're doing to them?
Yeah.
It's the reporting mechanism.
Yes, it's the reporting. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
they
the
reporting
difference.
a lot of these, like what you see in cities, the research on cities, the peer pressure. The city see the other city doing, I want to do the same. And then kind of, an example is this bicycle. Now, I don't know, have this bikeway here, the bicycle.
We have some.
Many cities in the West are impressed. Boston has, New York has. One city started doing New York, that expanded and now